So today we're talking about the law of cosines. So this is how we find a missing length or missing angle in a non-right triangle when we can't use law of sines. So remember, in law of sines, we need to know an angle and a side opposite it. Okay, so in this case, we're not going to know that much information. So for instance, maybe I know these two sides of my triangle and I know this angle, and I want to know this side. Okay, so A is what we're trying to solve for, this length here, but we only know these three pieces of information. I don't have enough to solve with law of sines. So that's where we're going to need law of cosines. Okay, so how this formula works, we're going to copy this off to the side here. And I'm going to help label this in. This is the one we want to use for lengths. So solving for a side is this top formula here. Okay, so in this case, A is going to represent the side we want. Okay, so side A is just going to be represented by whichever side we want. It doesn't have to be labeled A, but that's what we're going to plug in for. The side we want, and that's usually the one we don't know, of course. And then everything in the middle here, BC, negative 2BC, right? B squared, C squared. All of this has to do with the other two sides. So we have to know the other two sides here. And then it's times the cosine of angle A. And A is the angle opposite the side we want. So it's the angle across from it. So if we're solving for A, B and C are going to be my other two sides. We need to know those. And A, which is the angle opposite the side we want, is the angle we need to know. We're going to put in cosine there. Okay, so let's run through an example. So find the missing angle or side length, round to the nearest tenth, which is 1 decimal place. So find length BC. So from B to C is here at the bottom. And in fact, this is kind of set up exactly we were just talking about in A. So we could call this length the lowercase a if you want. You could call it x. In fact, let's just call it x. This is the unknown. This is the length we want. Okay, so since we're solving for a side, we're going to use the top version of the formula. We'll talk about the bottom one later. So in this case, the side we want squared equals, so the length we want squared equals, and all of this part, remember, is the other two sides. So it actually doesn't matter which one we call B or C, but we're going to square both of them and add them together. So 25 squared plus 28 squared minus 2 times 25 times 28. Again, it doesn't matter if you put the 25 first or the 28 first in both of these places. Okay, times the cosine of the angle opposite our side. So that's the cosine of 66 degrees. Now note, this would give me the length we want, x, but this would be x squared. So how do we get rid of x squared? We've got to do a giganto square root over all of this. And now this massive thing, we have to type in our Desmos calculator. Okay, so here's our Desmos calculator. We're going to start with a big old square root. We're going to type in 25 squared. In fact, you can just press this button if you just want to square something. Plus 28 squared minus 2 times 25 times 28. You can just press times here, just like parentheses myself, times the cosine of 66 degrees. And make sure your calculator says degrees, or you can read degrees on the screen somewhere. Okay, so here it is. This is the formula that will find this length down here. And if we're rounding to the nearest tenth, that is 1 decimal place. So we look one digit out to see if we need to round up or not, and here we do. It's actually going to round our 9 to a 10. So we have to put a 0 and carry the 1. This is 29.0. Our missing side length is about 29.0. And the units they gave us was kilometers. About 29.0 kilometers is our missing length. All right, let's try a second example. So this time we're asked to find AC. So from A to C, that's this length here. Again, let's just call it X for our unknown. And note again that we know a side or two sides and the angle where they come together here, right? This is the side angle side case. And we don't have enough information for law of sines. So once again, we're going to use law of cosines. So this is the side we want. So it's the side we want squared equals, that's right, side we want squared equals, remember all of this in the middle, all the way up to cosine has to do with the other two sides. So it doesn't matter which one you call B or C, but we're going to do 16 squared plus 6 squared minus 2 times 16 times 6 times the cosine, hence law of cosines, of the angle between them. Cosine 46 degrees. So we need to get this square off our x. We're going to do a giganto square root here. And now we need to go to our calculator. Okay, so once again, we're going to start with the square root. We need 16 squared plus 6 squared minus 2 times, this time I'm just going to hit times, 16 times 6 times the cosine, 46 degrees. And again, make sure it says degree on your calculator. And it looks like our missing length, if we're going to 1 decimal place, so we look one more unit out, and that 9 does mean we need to round up. So about 12.6 centimeters. About 12.6 centimeters. And that seems reasonable, right? It looks less than the 16 length here, but definitely much bigger than the 6. So I always like to make sure that my answers seem reasonable. All right, so that's for solving for a length. So next up, we're going to look at how to solve for an angle using this formula, which, by the way, is literally this formula, but getting A, like the angle here by itself, rearranging that formula. So if A is the angle you want, okay, lowercase a is the side opposite it. And then everything else in this formula has to do with the other two sides. Okay, so now note that to use this to find an angle, you have to know all three sides. So to find a missing angle using the law of cosines, you need to know all three sides. Okay, so let's check this out. Here's the formula again up here, and we'll run through it as we go through our first example. Find the missing angle or side length. We're going to be doing angles now. Round to the nearest 1/10 of a degree. Okay, so let's see. First thing I notice is we want to find the angle at B, which is here. Okay, so this is the angle we're trying to figure out. Looks pretty small. So I would expect something, 20-ish degrees or less maybe. So if this is the angle we want, so in this case, we're going to write this out as the measurement of angle B. Okay, so the measurement of angle B in this case, and so remember this would be the side opposite it. So in our formula, if this is the angle we want, this is the side opposite it. So we need the inverse cosine of this big fraction. And it starts off with the side opposite it squared, 12 squared. Then it's minus, and everything else in here has to do with the other two sides. One of the sides squared and the other side squared over -2 times the other two sides. Okay, so lots of things to fill in here. So our other two sides are 28 and 18. And it doesn't matter which goes where, but one needs to go in each spot up top and in the bottom, 28 and 18. Okay, so this is what we need to type in our calculator. So we're going to start, we need to go to the function tab to find inverse cosine. Then we need a fraction. So if we go back to main, this is the fraction tool, or you can just hit divide, like /. And then we want 12 squared minus 28 squared minus 18 squared. Press down to get into the bottom. We need -2 times, and you can just press times here, you don't have to use parentheses, 28 times 18. And there we go. We've got everything. Make sure it matches what we have here. And this tells me my angle. And looking at my angle, I said it's probably less than maybe 20. Not a bad guess here. 16.99. So this 9 rounds our other 9 up to a 10. So 0, carry the 1. We're at 17.0 degrees. And this time we're talking about an angle. So the measurement of angle B is about 17.0 degrees. And again, make sure that your calculator says degree on it, so you're not in radians. Okay, here's one more to try out. This time we're finding the angle at C. Okay, so here's the angle it wants us to find at C. Once again, notice all we know are the 3 sides. So this is the side, side, side case. We want to find the angle here at C. Okay, so the way we're going to write this, the measurement of angle C is approximately, well, it's really exactly equal at this point, so we can use equal here, the inverse cosine of, okay, and we're going to need this big fraction here. Okay, so remember the side opposite it, which is here, 18, is what goes at the start in our formula here. So it's 18 squared minus something squared over -2 times something, where our other somethings here are the other 2 sides. We need to plug in 17 and 30. 17 and 30. Now if you put the 30 and then 17, 30 and then 17, that doesn't matter. But here, we've got everything plugged in. We should be able to find our angle. Again, this looking kind of small, maybe a little bit bigger than the previous one, maybe a little bit bigger than 20, I'm not sure. We'll find out with our calculator here. So we can clear all. And again, you need to go to function to get to inverse cosine. Your calculator might be somewhere else. We're going to hit either divide or the fraction one. You just hit divide, it'll start you with the fraction. So we're going to type in here 18 squared minus 17 squared minus 30 squared. Press down to get into the bottom. Remember, it's -2 times 17 times 30. And just double checking we got it all typed in. Looks good. And yeah, a little bit bigger this time. In fact, if we're going to the nearest tenth, obviously that 0 means we don't need to round up. So we're going to say it's 32.0. Actually, really close to 32 on the dot. About 32.0. So the measurement of angle C is approximately 32.0 degrees. And that extra 0 just lets anybody that's reading our answer know it's not exactly 32, but we round to the tenths place, and it just happened to round to 0. Okay, so in order to find an angle with law of cosines, you need to know all 3 sides. We'll cover a case in class when maybe you don't know all 3 sides. And to find a missing length, using law of cosines, we need to know 2 sides and the angle between them to find the length opposite that angle. Okay, so this is really, both of them are the same formula. One's just to help us solve for a side, one of them is to help us solve for an angle. We'll do some more examples in class. That's it.